We were also joined just a short time ago from Melbourne by Peter Khalil, a foreign policy advisor to former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. He's now an associate professor at the Centre for International Security Studies at Sydney University. Peter Khalil, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
You were in Cairo just a few weeks ago, and you've still got quite high-level contacts there. What are they telling you now about the pro-Mubarak demonstrators in Cairo?
Well, the people I've spoken to in Tahrir Square during the protests, and even people who are protecting their homes with iron bars and baseball bats on shifts through the night, are telling me that many of these pro-Mubarak demonstrators are secret police or interior ministry officials who have been unleashed by the regime to instill fear amongst the general populace, and really to send the message that without Mubarak in control, there's chaos. I don't think that will eventually work. I think it's quite cynical by the regime, and I think it's a very desperate move that we're seeing, and the violence is getting much worse. Robert
Fisk is calling it Hosni Mubarak's counter-revolution. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't even give it that the respect of that phrase, because really he's just clinging to power and using every means possible to try and divide, I think, the core of the democratic protesters and maybe take the middle class away from the core of the younger protesters who may be fearful of chaos and lack of stability in the country. He may have some success in that, but I think most people see through it. And in fact, they caught a lot of these looters and some of the pro-Mubarak demonstrators with ID badges which showed that they were police officers.
Is it clear now to you that Hosni Mubarak intends to dig in and try and stay in power no matter the cost in violence and blood?
Look, I think, Tony, he's going to hold on as long as he can. He's going to cling to power. He's been an absolute ruler for 30 years. He's been in complete control. I find it very unlikely that he will just step down as easily as, say, President Ben Ali did in Tunisia. I think the caveat to that, of course, is immense US pressure. If the administration really pushes him, they may be able to find him a somewhat of a respectful exit, I suppose. But I think he's going to hold on as long as he can, and I don't think he really cares about the additional violence that will be unleashed, because if you look at the human rights record over the years, I don't think he's paid much heed to human rights or bloodshed or violence. So I think he'll hold on. And this is worrying because the longer he holds on, the longer demonstrations go and the more violence and instability there is.
What will the army do? Because they've been sending out quite mixed messages.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've said that the army is critical to this. If they decide to go with the protesters, I think it's pretty much the end of Mubarak. But we've got to remember that the army is very much part of the Mubarak regime, the top brass. Mubarak himself was a former Air Force. They're very much interconnected. And they've benefited from the Mubarak regime for 30 years, particularly from some of the US military aid that has gone their way. However, ordinary Egyptians see them with great sort of patriotism as a sort of neutral institution, and they respect them greatly. And they're trying actually to bring them on side. Much different, they're viewed much differently, I suppose, than the detested interior security forces and police forces.
There is one man who may hold the key to all of this. The Americans certainly appear to think so. Omar Suleiman, the man that Mubarak has appointed as vice president, former chief of the Egyptian intelligence services. You've met him, I believe. What do you think of him?
Look, I was struck, Tony, by the fact that apart from all the other Egyptian ministers we met on a couple of trips who basically were, quite frankly, puppets of Mubarak, Omar Suleiman, even 6 or 7 years ago, was able to make decisions on the spot without referring the question to Mubarak. So he had real power within the regime. He's known as Mubarak's consigliere. He's also very highly regarded, if not respected in some circles, within the US administrations of the past 10 years, and also with the Israelis because of his work on some of the Israeli-Palestinian issues. And he's very close to the CIA, of course, as an intelligence head. He's ruthless, but he is effective. And I think what he does over the next couple of weeks will be critical to how this transition plays out.
We heard from Martin Indyk last night that the Americans would like him to help get rid of Mubarak and remain as a transitional leader to bring forward elections as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think the Obama administration obviously has tilted towards the protesters and the understanding that Mubarak is likely to be finished. So what they want to see is a peaceful transition and a period of stability with an interim government. If Suleiman's that guy with Baradei and with other opposition groups as part of that caretaker period, I think they would be happy with that. What the real risk is, of course, is the longer that Mubarak himself holds on, the more chance there is of instability and violence continuing. And I think Suleiman himself also is inherently risky because the protesters, the core of the protesters, won't accept him either. They want to see him gone as well because he's part of the hated regime. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. He's reached out already to the opposition, and he's also, there are some reports saying that he's also asked Mubarak to stand down, and I think he's got sort of that halfway there with Mubarak saying that he will not stand for re-elections.
So where do you think this will end up? Because tomorrow we're going to see Friday prayers yet again. We'll see large demonstrations after that. This could be a crunch point, if the army steps in particular.
Well, on the issue of the army stepping in, what was somewhat disturbing is that when some of the pro-Mubarak thugs that came in and started the violence against the demonstrators, the democratic demonstrators, the army didn't really step in and protect those demonstrators. So that is somewhat disturbing. I think Fridays are traditionally the day of protest. As you said, after Friday prayers, hundreds of thousands will go out. I think this is going to continue.